hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome back to another episode of Our Girls Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, joined by Sherry Hudspeth and Mike Benelli. Our guest today has established herself as a prominent figure in sports journalism, bringing energy and insight to hockey fans everywhere. Jamie Hersch is a distinguished broadcaster and studio host who has worked with the PWHL, Vegas Golden Knights, Minnesota Wild, and the NHL and MLB Network. She's a Minnesota native, and she developed a passion for sports early on, participating in figure skating during her youth. And she pursued her interest in journalism at the University of SoCal, graduating magna cum laude in 2009. I know people don't like to brag about that, but we do it for you, which is one of the nice parts of hosting the show. But beyond her professional achievements, we always like to say it, Jamie is a dedicated wife and a mother of two. We are so excited to delve into her experiences in sports media, her journey through the industry, and her perspectives on the evolving role of women in hockey broadcasting. Jamie, welcome to Our Girls Play Hockey.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You know, when a broadcaster tells me that, it makes me blush. It makes me feel pretty good, right? When the hockey players say it, I'm like, yeah, thanks. But when you say it, Jamie, it means a lot.
That was impressive. You did your research, which is the number one thing of being a broadcaster. So I'm impressed already.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. Jamie, where I want to start is this. You know, what drew you to a career in sports broadcasting, and how did being involved in sports play into that?
Yeah, well, I did grow up playing sports. I was a figure skater as a young girl, and then I also played softball, both slow pitch and fast pitch. I played basketball, I played volleyball, and so I've always loved sports, and my family all loved sports. And so it was kind of funny when I was in fifth grade. I remember it was Randy Moss's rookie year, so I'm dating myself, and my dad started really explaining to me the NFL and the rules of football and how it works. And so that year, the Vikings went 15-1. That was probably our year to win the Super Bowl. Wasn't meant to be. It's okay. I'm still not getting over it yet, but that's okay. We'll talk about other things.
You don't want to know where half of us are from, by the way. Just to interrupt you. A lot of us are in Philadelphia right now, so we'll leave it at that.
Congrats. Enjoy it. I have no idea what that feeling is like. They've never even been to the Super Bowl in my lifetime, my Vikings. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
That's really what I point to as the time when my sports fandom began, because I have a younger brother, and he was always about playing sports, right? But he didn't care about watching them. So my dad and I would religiously sit down and watch the Vikings game every Sunday. I remember crying when they lost the one game that year because I wanted the perfect season. And I just really blossomed into this sports fan as a 10-year-old girl. And I remember very vividly watching Michelle Tafoya at the time. I think it was Monday Night Football at the time that she was on. But I remember thinking, wow, she's a woman and she holds her own. She knows the sport. She asks good questions, and she is just like any of the men talking about football. And she didn't play football, but that doesn't mean that she can't talk about football. And so at a young age, I remember seeing someone that, looked more or less like me and thinking I could do that one day too. And so that's really where I think my whole sports broadcasting dream began, was a young age. And so, I worked my way through school, and then eventually in high school, I decided to be fun to try my hand at sideline reporting, so to speak. So I had a friend that wanted to make movies. And so he grabbed his home video, a little camcorder. We didn't have smartphones back then. And I, did my little reporting where every week I would go talk to the high school football coach and do interviews and come up with basically a little report previewing the big Friday night football game. And that aired on our high school little silly news station. But it was just really good experience, right? To just start doing it and see if I wanted to do it. And so that led to me applying with the state high school sports league to see if I could do like a student reporter role in their state high school football coverage. And they allowed that. And so that was great. And I got to do that. And then that led to the same thing with the basketball state tournament and the hockey state tournament. And I was able to kind of build a mini reel, so to speak, to send out to colleges. And that's where I landed at USC, which has a tremendous broadcast journalism program, nightly live student run newscasts that was really what I equate to kind of a first job in the business. Mm-hmm. And that helped launch me into my career.
So you get to do like a lot of cool stuff with Major League Baseball, the NHL, Hockey Day in Minnesota, Vegas Golden Knights. A lot of people just see the glitz and glamour of working in sports. What are some of the challenges? Is there a grind side to it that people don't see?
I think there is a bit of a grind, but I will say there's nothing like being at a live sports event. So a lot of my experience was in the studio as a studio host at NHL Network and MLB Network. And that's, I guess, where you might feel a bit more of the grind, because it is still really fun, right? There's lights and cameras and a lot of people behind the scenes that make the magic happen. And it's fun. And I loved all the people that I worked with, but I didn't get to go to a lot of the games except for the big events. So I did get to go to the All-Star Game, the Winter Classic, Stadium Series, and certainly the Stanley Cup Final. But now that I'm here in Vegas and I get to go to the Golden Knights games as part of my job, there's nothing that can quite replicate being in a live sports environment and just the natural energy there and excitement. And it really does not feel like work. There is a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't see, right? Going to morning skate, going to practice, setting up phone calls with players or coaches to try to get that insight so that I know what I'm talking about and I'm not just kind of doing it on the fly. So that part of it is work for sure, but it's so fun, really. And anytime, again, that you get to go into a live sporting environment, you are reminded that it's kind of a joke that we call this work.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that whole process, right, and having all these great moments that you're saying and you're involved. Can you maybe describe? And I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask for one moment that stands out, but maybe like as a broadcaster and somebody that's involved with all these great events, can you just talk a little bit about what those moments are like for you as maybe, you know, a fan, even like being in there and the energy it gives you as a broadcaster, you know, when you're in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, those moments are what make it so much fun, right? And there are moments that you realize it's so much bigger than me, right? And I used to get really nervous. I still get nervous from time to time, especially if I'm doing anything new. But anytime I feel nervous, I just kind of try to step back and realize, like, this moment is not about me. This moment is about these players who have worked so hard to be in these positions to compete for a Stanley Cup, or on the women's side, a Walter Cup for the PWHL. I mean, these are incredible moments. I've gotten to cover postseason baseball before, where, you know, you hear the crowd and the intensity of a full stadium. And it really is something special. And I try to really be intentional about taking a moment during the national anthem. That's kind of become my like sacred space where, you know, we aren't doing anything live. We always pre-tape because we try to be respectful of the anthem. And so I use that 2 to 3 minutes to step back and realize how cool it is to just be a witness of this moment and be a small part of the moment, no matter what it is. And you said you weren't going to put me on the spot and ask for a favorite, but I do have a favorite, and it's really anytime I've gotten to cover a Stanley Cup final, because that's just, I mean, for someone who's worked in hockey now for over a decade, like, I know what it means. And I've talked to players both who have won it and who spent maybe 15 years in the league and never won it. And they get emotional talking about the Stanley Cup and just how amazing it is to either, you know, fight for it and win it, or hope that you do and you never do. You know, I mean, there's just, it's such a special trophy, the Stanley Cup, that anytime I've gotten to cover a Stanley Cup final game, and especially to be there in the cup clinching game when, you know, they hoist it and all their families there. I remember last year talking to Paul Maurice, who had spent decades in the business and finally won the Stanley Cup. And he was in tears. And he told me how, you know, right away I called my mom and dad, like on the ice, the moment that I got a spare second. And that's so cool that, like, grown man who's, you know, people think is this tough guy, whatever, like he was crying because that's what it meant. And so that I would say covering a Stanley Cup final is my pinnacle, my peak moment.
I just wanted to ask too, because I know Sherry would appreciate this because of her role with Vegas, and I get to work with a lot of NHL clubs, you know, in like pregame stuff and a lot of programming that goes out there. How hard is it for you to not be like a fan, like to you know, to understand? Like, I know Sherry, right? Your staff, like, don't interact with the players. You can't ask for autographs. You can't take selfies. Like, it just because that's their job. Like, they're doing their job. You're doing your job. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, maybe just like how that is, and, you know, how you keep kind of an even keel about, well, we're both professionals here, but I'm just excited as, you know, the next person next to me here.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to be excited to an extent. And I think it's okay to be passionate, especially if you're working for a team. Like right now, when I'm working a Golden Knights game, I'm openly cheering for the Golden Knights. Like there's no secret about it because you're working for the team, right? And you get involved in it and you are excited because you know the players personally and you know the staff behind the scenes personally. And so it is a little different. But in terms of being a professional, you're absolutely right that you can't ask for autographs or pictures or something because we're all here to do a job. And as I said before, I feel lucky that it's my job. And so I don't want to jeopardize that or make it uncomfortable for anyone. And I think too, I go back to when I was in college, my now husband was my boyfriend at the time, and he was the head equipment manager for the USC football team. And at the time, this was Pete Carroll, Reggie Bush, Mark Sanchez, like big names. They were winning Rose Bowls and going to national championships. So they were a big deal. And he was around that every day. And I remember he would tell me, like, it's funny because people think of them as kind of gods almost, right? And they're just people, especially that. They were like college kids, right? Like they're just people. They want to be treated like people. They don't want to be treated any differently. And that stuck with me. And then certainly into my professional years too, the more I interacted with players and coaches, I realized they will be a better interview. They'll give you more insight. They'll just be happier in general if you just treat them like a normal person. And so to not be a fan and to really be a professional, but also just be a normal person, I think is paramount.
Awesome.
Covering, just want to get a little bit into your work with the PWHL. How has that been as far as your preparation and going to new cities? And can you give any insight on the new league and covering the new league? It's like you mentioned your research. Is it a little bit harder to find insiders and stuff with the PWHL to prepare for games?
For sure. There is a lot less out there in terms of background stories and personal side of these women. But it has been honestly one of the privileges and honors of my life to this point to be able to be a part of something kind of so revolutionary and hopefully game changing. And I really do believe that the PWHL is here to stay, and that we'll look back 10, 20 years from now and remember when it began, and we'll equate it to like the WNBA right now. Like no, WNBA is not going anywhere, right? And we've seen a couple of different iterations of professional women's hockey leagues that just weren't sustainable, and the pay wasn't high enough to make it a living job for these women. You know, I know girls who I used to, one was an intern actually at NHL Network. This is several years ago, but she played for the Riveters. And at the time, that league was such that, I mean, I think they were making like $10,000, right? Like you can't live on that. And so they would have one or two jobs, and then these games and these practices, they would have to squeeze them in around normal work hours. And so they'd have 9 o'clock games. And that's not what being a professional athlete should look like, especially in this country. And so it's really amazing to see the work that so many of the players and the people behind the scenes have put in, and Billie Jean King, getting the funding element of this to truly make it a first of its kind, sustainable, professional women's hockey league that I think is here to stay. So that's kind of the sidebar of what it means to me to be a part of that. And then secondly is just, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, because play-by-play is something that I never dreamed of doing. And similar to how I said that I watched Michelle Tafoya growing up, and I could see that example as something that I could maybe be one day, there were no examples of women calling play-by-play, really, in any sport. And eventually Beth Moen started calling college football. Now we have a few more women across all sports that are getting involved in play-by-play, but no one ever told me, like, you can't call play-by-play because you're a woman. Right. But I never even thought that was in the cards, because I was like, no, women are sideline reporters, And so the fact that I now get to try to call play-by-play and hopefully get better and better. It's still relatively new for me. I think I've done it for 3 seasons, which has amounted to maybe like 50 games total max. So I'm still very new, but I'm hoping that with each season and each rep that I get, that I can be a little bit better, so that other little girls out there can hear my voice and say, oh, like I could do that one day.
That's the thing about trailblazing, which you're doing, is it can be so easy for people to forget. And you kind of just alluded to this, that until you see it, you might not even realize it's a possibility, whether that's women playing professional hockey, doing play-by-play, any situation like that, right? So first off, you are a trailblazer, and I love everything that you're doing, because I have a daughter, right, and she sees that, and now it's her reality. It is just a reality that professional hockey is there, and broadcasting in every aspect of it is there, amongst other things. What's cool about where you're at today, and you just mentioned some of the adversity you're facing now, but to rise the ranks, to break through the ceiling, there's a tremendous amount of adversity along the way that you have to pass through. And I'm wondering if you could dive in for our audience, especially the young kids listening, of, look, on the surface, it might look, it's awesome. And it is, right? Everything you said is awesome, but there's adversity along the way. Can you talk about some of those adversities that you've faced and how you've overcome?
Yeah, I think it's not exclusive to broadcasting, but I think it's just amplified in broadcasting, is the natural tendency to compare yourself to others, and for others to compare you to others, and again, that's in every field. There's going to be a hierarchy, but especially in broadcasting, it just seems very subjective, right? And it's how you look, how you dress, how your voice sounds, or anything that you can kind of pick apart if you're not careful, and other people will pick you apart. And that's just the nature of the world in which we live. And that's I've come to accept that as not only normal, but almost in a weird way, a compliment, right? Like if I get trolled on Twitter or something, it's like, wow, somebody was watching or cared enough to say something kind of nasty. And like, that's not my favorite, obviously. I'd much rather have very nice comments and supportive comments. And a lot of those are. I will say I feel very lucky that, I've gotten a tremendous amount of support as well from social media. But yeah, I think that is probably the biggest part of adversity, is always feeling like, first of all, like you have to prove yourself. That's another secondary part of this, is especially as a woman, I think in sports, credibility is incredibly difficult to earn, and it's very easy to lose. And so that is kind of my personal motivator, and my own personal pressure I put on myself is to be the most prepared that I can be, because people can pick apart what I look like, what I sound like, anything like that, but they will never be able to affect like how prepared I am and how knowledgeable I am, right? And so if I put in the time and I do the research and I do the work behind the scenes, I can go in knowing that I am equipped to do my best. So there's a quote that actually Russell Wilson, who used to be a quarterback at Wisconsin, when I was doing my first job back in my first job out of college, was a weekend sports anchor in Madison, Wisconsin. And so I got to cover Russell Wilson in his 1 year with the Badgers. And I remember he was so impressive. I always was really impressed with what he said, especially as a college student. And one of his quotes that stuck with me was, "The separation is in the preparation." And that he truly believes the same thing, that you're going to separate yourself by how prepared you are. So I have really taken that to heart. And now I'm still quoting Russell Wilson 15 years later or whatever. But that's something that stuck with me.
You know what I love about that answer, Jamie, is that you could take that answer and apply it to playing the game as well.
Yeah.
And when you think about the young athletes out there, and look, I'm blessed to be in broadcasting and in the game. And I've always told people that the broadcasting approach is really not that dissimilar from playing a hockey game. The lights are on, you're going to have to perform in some way. And I love that you brought up the comparison, because I think our kids today growing up are in more of that comparison than we ever were growing up. And again, I think, all of us here got some of that, but with social media and the way the world works today, you could be 10 years old and people talking about you on social media, good or bad. So I think it's important what you said, A, that if anybody's talking about you, it's a compliment. B, I think it's also important that it can be very easy to only focus on negative when there may be a lot of positive, right? You see this in business, you see this in sports. 15 people might come up to you, great game, great broadcast tonight. And one person might be like, you suck. And we'll pay attention to that one person's comment over the 15 good people. I'm kind of speaking to the kids playing too. But what you just said at the end there is so important and applies to hockey. The preparation, the time you put in, right? And again, like, I love that you brought that up, because it really does apply to everything. It's not just, it's, how about this? It's a recipe for success in whatever you want to do.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're all going to face those adversities, kids listening, as you get there. And here's Jamie saying it with a smile and, telling you that you can do it. But yeah, it applies to everything.
Yeah, I love having this conversation with Dave Starman about over there, and he'll get those like horrible Twitter X responses like you're garbage. You don't know what you're talking about. It's like, hey,
what do you
Thanks
know?
for listening. Thanks for listening. I think it's great that you're even taking the time to give me a critique, and I'll take it and use it. And it's not even motivation. Even speaking to a guy like Dave, like I really lean on him. In a lot of ways, like on both boys and girls, but just in the sport in general, right? That a lot of times on our show, we talk about all the different layers of hockey and how you can advance in the game as a player, as a scout, as a GM, as a video analysis person,
Right.
and in broadcasting. And I think, maybe could you talk a little bit about, what young female athletes can do, to break into the sport, like you talked about. You're in there with the eight. I'm not. Mine would have been like an 8-track.
Yeah.
With the battery pack. But I think for what they can do now, and really the resources they have, that you can't just go from, hey, I want to be a broadcaster, to, well, I'm going to be on ESPN,
Right.
or the NHL Network. Like, what are all the little things they can do to kind of hone their craft and find out if this is something they really want to do?
Well, there's a lot of things, and you're right. The fact that technology is kind of at our disposal now is so great for kids, and it's so accessible for anyone who wants to just try their hand at broadcasting. Because I do have a lot of these conversations with either college students or high school students who say, hey, I want to do what you did. Like, what's your advice? What's your roadmap? I said, there is no roadmap. Everyone's journey is different. And that sounds really daunting, but it can be empowering if you just kind of take control and just start trying it on your own. So I would just say the amount of experience that you can get, no matter what it looks like, no matter how many people are watching, just do it. Do it for you. Don't do it for the number of subscribers or whatever. But whether it's a YouTube channel, a TikTok channel, or whatever it might be, or if you just do it for yourself, and then you have, your parent or your friend, take a video on their phone of you giving your analysis or your take on something, or your recap of the game or a preview of the game to come. Any experience that you do where you kind of get those butterflies in your stomach because you realize you're going to be on TV or the phone or whatever, like that is experience that will serve you down the line. And so I just say, get out there, do as much of that as you can. If that's something that you want to do, find a buddy, find a parent or a sibling that's willing to kind of give you that experience, or I guess even find a tripod. I don't know. They have like little phone things. You can set it up yourself, and it will do two things. It will give you the experience of wanting to speak properly and present yourself well, but it'll also give you that recording so that you can watch it back, which is probably the hardest thing to do, right? I think anyone here can say, if you watch yourself back, whether it's on film playing hockey or talking on a podcast or me doing anything on TV, it is painful, right? It's cringeworthy because usually we are our own toughest critics. And so I think that would be what I'd say to anyone who's looking or watching out there, listening out there, that wants to try to do that, is just do it and then keep doing it.
Yeah, we had, it was really funny with my son. We used to have, my younger son would I could never find a parent to do the iPad, on the tripod at these games. And if he didn't have Live Barn or some other way, I'm like, hey, listen, can you do that? Can you you're here at the rink, you're stuck here for 3 hours. Do me a favor, just stand there and move the tripod for me and just and videotape the game so we can review it later. And so he would start to, and you got to hear his play-by-play. It's the most hilarious. Like, he's like, oh my God, that was terrible. Like, I can't believe that player. So when I replay the video, I can't replay his audio to the team because it's like I said, you can't be critiquing these guys every time you come up the ice. So can you just talk a little bit about, on your side, on the professional level, how hard is it to really, like, you have to run into these guys in the hallway and these girls, right? And like after a game. So, where's your line for,
that's a good question.
I'm going to give a little critique, but I'm not going to throw you under the bus here.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it is a fine line. And I think there is a difference between, giving feedback and saying like, oh, that was a tough penalty to take there, or that wasn't a good look, or, or she's going to want to have that one back, or she'll be seeing that wide open net in her dreams tonight. I said things like that. And I'm like, I'm sure they are listening. Their parents are listening. Their siblings are listening. And I think that's fine because you have to be able to feel freedom to be a little bit critical. But I think as long as you keep it professional, right? And you keep it on ice related and nothing personal, because I don't know what they're going through personally, right? I'm just watching their play on the ice and evaluating it. And also kind of, that's not really my role. Like my role is to call the play. And I think, Dave Starman, you mentioned, I work with him a lot, and he's my analyst. He's kind of explaining why the play happened the way that it did.
He's the one you let get in trouble. You'll let him get.
I let him do that. Yeah.
You tell the story, he does the commentary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The same with the Golden Knights, where I am a bit more of an analyst, and it is my job to kind of offer takes. Again, I think you keep it professional. And there was a time not very long ago, as Sherry knows, where the Golden Knights were really struggling. And it was tough because, our audience wants to respect us as journalists and be able to watch it and kind of understand why they're struggling. They know they're losing, 8 of 10 or whatever, but it's our job to not sugarcoat that and not say, oh, it's okay, get them next time. It's our job to kind of point out maybe things that could be done differently so that next time, or that they can get back on the right track.
Jamie, for me as both a watcher and as someone involved, it's all about trust, right? Like, and it's trust with people you're not in front of. Like you're in their living room, but they're not in front of you.
Right.
I think, can you talk about, this is probably more of an ethical type thing, but building that trust with the audience is really important. And the audience is smarter than people think. They know, not you obviously, but they can tell when someone's not being authentic. They can tell when someone's not being trustworthy. Can you talk about that approach and how important it is, but also how you define and also distribute trust through a broadcast?
Yeah, I think it's trust. And I think it's, again, just going back to being credible, right? Like you want someone who is going to explain to you something and not just gloss over the bad parts, right? And so there is a trust factor for sure. And I think the best way I try to think about it is, pointing out things, whether they be good or bad, but always kind of with a positive spin on it. I hate using the word spin because it can mean many things in our society today, but trying to focus on the positive, but you can't deny the negative either. And if someone's on a 10-game goal drought or something and they need to score more, you say, talk about that and point that out and say, I know he's been working a lot harder, before and after practice, staying on the ice, trying to, change his socks, change what he's eating for breakfast, anything, shake up superstitions. And so you can talk about someone's struggles without again, making it personal, and B, without being too negative. So it's a fine line for sure.
Yeah, when I apply that to the players out there too, what's interesting about what you're saying is that to be able to take criticism without ego is a skill set, right? And we can actually apply this to broadcasting too, right? One of the things that you were talking about before about with the kids who want to get involved with it, it's about reps. You got to do reps. Yeah. You got to do it and do it and do it and improve and do it. And you're probably going to be very bad at it the first time you do it, and that's okay. Yeah. Right? When we talk about hockey training, you're not going to have 100-mile-per-hour slap shot. Not that you should even be working on that, but that's not likely to happen the first time you pick up a hockey stick.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're saying is the ability to drop the ego and to say, I'm going to try and I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better. I always joke with people about our podcast here. Like, we've been doing this close to 5 years. I say, if you want to laugh, go listen to the first 5 episodes, right?
Oh.
They sound so different to where we're at today. And I get people like, oh no, they're it's such a different time period in the show. We've evolved.
Yeah.
And the expectation of that evolution is important as a broadcaster, as a hockey player, as a person, but also the pursuit of that. And I want to ask you about that too. I love that you talked about the Stanley Cup moments and those great, being a trailblazer in the professional women's hockey league, but the journey, man, that must be so cool, right? To just experiencing that. Because look, the Stanley Cup, which I'm not downplaying at all by saying this, it is just a moment. I mean, you win it, you experience it, it's wonderful, and then the next season comes eventually.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so can you talk about the journey of this experience as well? And again, it sounds like that started at USC, right? That you've been on this journey for a while.
Yeah. And the journey is a really big part of it, because it's easy when you're in the tough parts of those journeys. And when you hear no, whether it's making a team, you get cut, or you don't make the team you wanted to, or whatever, or you don't get the minutes you want. Or on my side, I applied for a lot of jobs that I did not get and heard no many, many times. And even now, kind of moving our family out to Vegas and trying to kind of pivot and start fresh, I'm hearing no a lot. So it's tough. But it also, now that, when you get older, like I am, you have the benefit of looking back and saying, oh yeah, this isn't the first time that I've been told no. And
Right.
yet look at all the yeses that came because of the no's. And, I think it sounds a little bit like a cop out, but it really does always work out some
Yeah.
way, and it's never probably the way, no one can plan their life to a T. And if someone out there has, then I'd love to hear your secrets, because I never in my wildest dreams thought that A, I'd be working in play-by-play in hockey, or B, I'd be living in Vegas. Like, none of these things were on my radar 10 years ago. And so I think that is a really cool thing to remember, is that the journey is full of ups and downs, no matter what your life looks like, no matter the field. And hopefully you can get to a point in your life where you look back, and even if there's teenagers out there, I'm sure they can look back on times when they were kids and they didn't get what they wanted, and they can think,
Right.
oh yeah, but that still worked out, right? And so if you can always try to have that perspective, that just kind of keep going through whatever it is that you're frustrated by, or that you are bummed about, that you heard that no, just keep going. And one day you'll look back and be like, it all worked out okay.
There's my belief is things happen as they're supposed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
We always hear things happen for a reason. And I say, I think things happen the way they're supposed to happen. The gift that we're given is our ability to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one of my favorite quotes from a women's basketball coach was, it's not life gets easier. It's you learn to deal with the hard better. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing with being told no, which I love you brought that up. It's like the first time that happens, it's devastating. It still sucks 20 years later when you get told no, but
Yeah.
you understand how to deal with it now, right? It's you've learned to deal with the hard better. And the perspective that you just shared of, okay, the answer is no, we'll find a way. We'll keep moving forward. That's a skill set too, that again, broadcasting hockey, for the younger audience listening, you can learn that skill.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because as kids, you get told no literally every day, and usually for your own benefit. I'll say that to the parents out there, like, don't eat that. There's a reason we're telling you that. But learning how to deal with that hard, it's a fantastic perspective, Jamie. I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to chime in here and say that I'm really excited that you're in Vegas and that you're happy that you made that move. So the first time Jamie was on the desk, we have a very strong broadcast team here, and I really enjoy our Vegas Golden Knights broadcast. But the first night, Jamie just popped up. No one told anyone. Like, she just popped up on the desk, and I was like, oh my God, we have Jamie Hersch here. Like, I was so excited. We just had Cassie Campbell was on our show. I'm a big fan of her career, and Jen Botterill, Cheryl Pounder. I mean, yourself, your career, I think women have come a long way in broadcasting. Just my question is, like, where do you see the room for growth for women in broadcasting?
Yeah, I think there is still room for growth for sure. And it's great to celebrate the progress because it's worth celebrating. But yes, thank you for bringing that up, Sherry, because there's definitely room to grow in all facets, right? I mean, we're seeing people like yourself kind of in new roles or roles that probably were typically held by men. And now you're kind of being a trailblazer in your own right with an NHL franchise. And we're seeing people like Jessica Campbell up in Seattle, who's the first female to be, a full-time member of an NHL coaching staff. And she's fantastic. And so I think like we're seeing it slowly, but just speaking from my perspective, I think, again, seeing more play-by-play, hearing more women calling play-by-play, I think is really key. And also the analyst role. We're seeing a lot more of that now with, you mentioned Jen Botterill, Cassie Campbell, AJ Malesko comes to mind. Gigi Marvin just retired from the PWHL and now has started calling broadcasts with me in Boston here and there, which is good because those roles in the booth were traditionally held by men. And so people just get used to hearing a man's voice, calling the action, explaining what's happening. But hockey is so great because women know just as much about hockey as men, right? And a lot of these women are gold medalists, right? Olympic gold medalists, world championship gold medalists. They've got the experience. They understand the game. It's really not that different, right? There might be subtle nuances between the men's game and the women's game, but at the end of the day, like there's a puck, there's 5 skaters on each team, there's a goalie, like it doesn't change that much. And so the fact that we now are accepting women in those roles is really exciting. And I want to see that even more, right? Whether it be on the national stage with ESPN or TNT, or certainly even with teams. There's no team that has a female play-by-play or even analysts. I think Cassie did it with the Flames for a while, but I don't know that she did every game. So again, if that hopefully comes to fruition sometime in the next 5 years, I think that would be a really encouraging step for a team to say, we know this isn't super traditional, and yeah, we're going to hear it from a lot of people out there that don't like hearing a woman's voice calling hockey because it's a men's game, or whatever it is. I hope that a team has the courage to identify a woman and kind of put her in that role and normalize it, right? So that not just little girls, but little boys out there can hear a woman's voice calling sports and think that that's normal.
Is there a way for us as youth hockey organizers and people that run, like you see right now, the trend is there's a lot of organizations that are going to girls only, programming from, they're trying to get coaches. PWHL did a great job of finding, women officials, and make sure every official on the ice is a woman. But you can't just materialize women officials, right? They don't just come and say, hey, next year we need, 35 women's officials. And the same thing with broadcasting, right? So what can we do as a youth hockey organization that runs girls hockey programs in the broadcasting side of things? Like, what are some of the things you would suggest that we can do to kind of develop broadcasters and play-by-play for women and broaden that pool, so when they do go to USC or they go to a school that has broadcasting, that it's normalized?
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up a couple of good points within that question, but I think, just opportunity is first and foremost, right? Like I'm very thankful and always will be that NHL Network even gave me the opportunity to try play-by-play, because that's where I first tried it. We didn't go to the games. We just basically took the TV feed. And so we were in our little studio, me and Kevin Weeks, and we're calling the action on the monitor, which is objectively more difficult because you're limited to whatever you can see. You don't know what's coming. We can't ask for replays. But that is how I learned how to do play-by-play at first. And I'm always just super grateful to them for having the courage to put me out there and see if I could do it. And I cringe at those games too, right? Because it's tough to go back and watch your first of anything. And so my point is, I think opportunity is the way to just create that path for young women out there, is just by encouraging them. And maybe there's, I never want to be exclusive either. That's the hard thing too, because I do think that little boys should get the opportunity to practice their play-by-play too. But I think just because it's already, there are so many examples out there for little boys, I think encouraging little girls or young women to take those opportunities, which they might have never even dreamed of, because I had never dreamed of it until someone mentioned it to me, like, oh, would you ever call play-by-play? And I laughed and I said, no. And then he said, why not? And I said, that's a great question. I don't know why not. So opportunity and yeah, just more reps, however you can get them. I don't really know. I'm not as involved in the youth hockey and like how that all works, but if there are,
just like,
yeah, we can change that. We can.
Why not?
I just interviewed a kid, a young man the other day who wants to get into broadcast. They're like, oh, I can't get into this team. I can't get into that team. I can't get into this team. I go, listen, do you know how many parents would love to hear their kid getting a play-by-play or color commentating on their regular game? Like, just do it. And if people like it, they'll like it. If you're no good, you're no good. You'll find out right away that you're unable to do it. But I think one of those pieces of what you're saying is, if you have the right personality, if you're energized to do this kind of thing, if you're bored at your brother's hockey game and you're like, I can't, there's only so much time I can spend on my phone. How can I use this in a productive way that could help me find a path that maybe doesn't really exist for boys and girls?
Right. You're right that there are so many outlets now for these kind of opportunities. Like I have family that's still in Minnesota, and my cousin is 12, and so he's on a hockey team in a big league that travels and does all that, and they have a mom call play-by-play on the live stream or whatever, as is so common these days, right? That they have live streams with grandparents and everyone can watch. And my aunt sent it to me because she just thinks this woman is so great, and she's so calm, and she just and then she only talks about the one team, right? She doesn't know anything about the other team, but she talks about their team, Edina, and just very calmly does play-by-play. But that's really cool, that she does it. And also it would be cool if a young kid, girl, boy, whoever, decided like, maybe I should do this. And I feel like most people would like that, to listen to that.
I think
there's plenty of hams in the rinks. There's no doubt about it. Guys, plenty of kids that will get in there and speak their mind.
Yeah, just got to know what you're doing. That kid sucks. You can't do that. Jamie, you brought up a really good point a few minutes ago, that in this space, we talked earlier about you haven't seen what you haven't seen. And it is important, obviously, for the young ladies and women out there to see this. And you said it too. Also the young boys, right? Like, we want to normalize this for everyone. So the question I have for you here is for the dads listening, for the male coaches listening, even the little boys that are listening, how can we be an ally in this pursuit as men, right? Because again, we have to be allies to help pursue this.
Yeah. I think just by being supportive and encouraging, right? And the other part of this too, that, I'm not sitting here saying, I think women should get all these opportunities without consequence, right? Like, I think you need to be good. And what Mike brought up about, all the female refs that the PWHL has brought in, that's awesome. And I'm super supportive of that. There are also some times where a woman maybe isn't as qualified, but because she's a woman, just getting this opportunity. So that's where I'm kind of like in the middle here. I don't think people should just get an opportunity because they're born this way. I think that if they're qualified and good, then yes, they should just have just as much opportunity as anyone else. And so kind of with what you're saying about being an ally, just support that, right? Like, if you are a dad and you hear a woman calling a game, don't say in front of your kids, or anyone for that matter, like, ugh, can't stand when a woman calls a hockey game or something. Because that is such a blanket statement. Like, I also have, luckily there are more and more female broadcasters now where we can hopefully start to have a spectrum, right? There's a huge spectrum of male play-by-play people, right? Like, there's Doc Emmerich over here and Kenny Albert over here. Then there's people that aren't so great over here. I'm not going to name names, but
yeah, let's not do that today.
Yeah, we're positive.
Oh, you want to go viral? Let's do it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but there's a spectrum, is my point, right? So you can have an opinion. You can say like, oh, I think he's great and I think he's not very good. And that's okay. It's not like you're saying, I think he sucks because he's a man. And that's where the problem is, right? Like, if we have more women out there, you can think that one woman isn't very good and you can think this woman is great. But until we have enough where there's a spectrum so that people don't say she stinks because she's a woman, that's a problem.
I am shocked at times. I mean that word literally when I hear what I hear dads say in front of their daughters sometimes. I'm like, man, she's standing right there. Like, what are you thinking, or you're not thinking?
Yeah.
A question for you too. You're around a lot of professional athletes, NHL athletes, PWHL athletes. So you said it before, you get to see the caliber of person, right? Can you talk to us about the caliber of person at that professional level?
I always say that hockey is kind of a unicorn among sports because I've actually covered all of the sports except soccer. I don't think I've ever covered soccer really. But I've covered the NFL a little bit when I was in Wisconsin. The Packers won the Super Bowl. I've covered Major League Baseball for a long time. I've covered the NBA and a lot of different sports. And there are good people and bad people in every walk of life, in every field. But I would say that it is more common to have great people in hockey for whatever reason. I feel like most players, coaches, staff, the vast majority, they're good people. And maybe there's a jerk here or there. But for whatever reason, I think there is a real positive side to hockey culture. That's whether it's I don't know what it is. Maybe because it started in Canada and everyone in Canada is so nice. No, I'm just kidding. But there's just
What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. There's just kind of an expectation, I think, in the hockey world that you be a good person first. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, especially as a woman in this field, right? Like I've never dealt with a lack of respect or anything like that from any hockey players that I can think of. Not so much in other sports. So I would commend all of the hockey players, certainly the coaches, the parents out there, because that's where it starts, right? Is kind of the idea of sportsmanship, the idea of respecting the game, respecting yourself, respecting each other, and respecting the people that you might come in contact with, whether it's equipment staff or trainers or broadcasters. And so I feel like I'm very lucky that I get to work in hockey, because it's more often than not, you're coming across some really good people.
Well, I think we're very lucky to have you in that space, Jamie. I mean that. And again, we've said it throughout the episode, you are a trailblazer, but the mindset, the effort, the passion that you bring through is as authentic as it comes, right? And to me, that's a big part of the key in succeeding in anything, right? But when you have someone like you that's bringing that to the table every single day, it makes the game better. It makes broadcasting better. And really, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is creating something that's going to make people really love their passion even more. You provide that on a nightly basis. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Mike, Sherry, Mike, do you have any other questions here for Jamie?
No, I think the more we can encourage women and just keep pushing for opportunities for women, I think it's going to make the game better for everyone.
Yeah, no, it's a really great to have you on, and I think get a listen to. I think it's obviously a lot of people have a lot of access to the Vegas Golden Knights games, but make an effort to listen to a PWHL game and tune in and get an opportunity to watch, because it is some entertaining hockey, and if you like checking hockey, it's a real entertaining.
Yeah, one of the last games I did was New York Boston. And they had 15 penalties, which is the most in any PWHL game to this point. And so it was just, I don't even know if we played more than 10 minutes of the game 5-on-5. It was crazy. But it was fun. And that's what they fought for, to have kind of this real physical game. And it's great. And for anyone who's like, I can't watch PWHL, we don't have a team in our market, they're all on YouTube.
YouTube for free.
Great. For free for now. Yeah. I don't know how long that'll be the case, but for now, they are all free. They're all on YouTube. And if you live in New York or Boston or Minnesota, then you will get them on the local cable channel too. But YouTube is great.
Well, I will say this real quick. If you are a hockey fan and you have not partaken in enjoying a PWHL game, you are losing. You are losing out. You are missing out. I mean, these games are fantastic and entertaining, and I love them. I love watching them with my son and my daughter. Yeah. All right. So again, if you're listening to this show, you're probably watching, but I wanted to make that proclamation anyway.
Well, thank you for the support.
Yeah, no, thank you for all you're doing. And again, Jamie, you've been a great guest today. Thank you for being here. And again, we're going to do our ride to the rink with you here too for the kids. So if you listen to this full episode, parents, remember this episode will come out soon as well. But Jamie, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Our Girls Play Hockey. Remember, if you have a question, a comment, you want to say anything, there's a link accompanying this episode in the description. You tap that, you can text right to us. We get it directly. Or it's becoming old school. If you want to email, team@ourkidsplayhockey.com at any point. We'll get those emails and we can share your thoughts on the air. But for Jamie Hersch, Sherry Hudspeth, and Mike Benelli, I'm Lee Elias. We'll see you on the next Our Girls Play Hockey. Skate on, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.